they weren't wearing masks. She said, no, we shot it up in
He went to college somewhere and collected checks to pay his dues on the sorority
Oh,
building.
he everywhere we
He
go.
kept it.
When we go to rehab, everybody in there's got a mask on. Everybody.
Pratt Hospital, they won't even let you
Yeah,
wear
it's
coffins anymore.
$26,000
You have to
for
wear
a book.
disposable.
Collected from his brother.
She said, no,
Well, no.
we don't have any
no,
sick
they didn't
people
do
in
that.
here, which we hope not. So,
He put it into a bus.
What's their thinking on the cloth?
And the next thing he got into
people are
was
washing
he
them
started
off anyhow.
counterfeiting money in the basement.
So they're carrying
folks'
iron
house.
germs with them.
And they caught him at Wichita.
With these, you're supposed to throw them away.
Shut him down at Wichita.
Yeah,
And he
so
got
you
out
spend
of
more
that.
money.
Yeah.
He didn't have no time for that. And then the next thing he
Yeah,
got
they
into
stopped
was
me
selling
once
some
and they made me
shirts
take my Easy Dog
to these
mask off.
people. And
Gave
they
me
had a
paper.
big building full of people that was robocalling with people getting money. Daddy ended up doing time for it.
I didn't
One of
get
them
Joy
did
call.
8 years.
Yesterday.
Yeah, one
Yeah,
of them
and
did 8
then
years and
Terry
another
called
one
us
did
from
4 years. His brother's got 4 years.
Sounded
He
good.
had a house that cost
His voice is
$26
clear.
million.
Yes.
It's just amazing how
Yeah,
much better
both of them
sounds
sound,
there.
although she said she's still probably in the
Yeah.
She's stopped,
$4 million.
stopped back going back to work.
He had a staircase and then upstairs, it cost
Yeah.
$1 million to build that
It's
staircase.
been what, in
In
weeks
that
now?
house.
9 weeks?
Well, they were gonna get out, he got 8
At least
years, and his
5.
brother got 4
Must be
years.
longer
One of
than
them
that.
wanted to get out in
We're
2011.
home 3 weeks before
Which
she's
is
in the
fine.
hospital.
And I wonder if they didn't start that up again, that's why we're getting all
We
these
said,
rumors. Somebody did.
well, all of September and all
They just
of
show over and over again.
part of August and all of
They'll
September.
have a 30-minute or hour program.
I'm going to go ahead and start a little bit early this morning. It's only 5 minutes after the hour instead of the usual 10. But let's go ahead and open our Bibles to the book of Revelation. And today we begin in chapter 12. Chapter 12 is really the center of the book, more than just physically. It marks a distinction. Chapters 1 to 11 is Revelation part 1, and chapter 12 through chapter 22 is Revelation part 2. As one of my favorite authors says, we've now come to the center of the book and are entering the second part of Revelation. There is no close connection between the content of chapter 11 and the content of chapter 12. Here's a new beginning. For Revelation basically has 2 main parts, and this is the key. These parts are divided into Christ's church persecuted by the world. And we've seen that in chapters 1 through 11, the letters to the 7 churches, the church at Pergamum, I know where you dwell, where Satan has his throne, and the death of the faithful witness Antipas. And we see the 4 men of the apocalypse, the writers of the apocalypse, and we go through this story, the opening of the 7 seals and the blowing of the 7 trumpets. This is really the story of the church and Jesus being persecuted by the world. Now we come to the second part with Christ and the church persecuted by Satan. That's the key. The last half of the book, we have this great battle between Satan and the army of light, chapters 12 through 22. Now, in addition, you can see chapter 1 is the introduction to the book, and chapter 22 is the conclusion of the book. So with that image in mind, I want to spend just a couple of minutes talking about spiritual warfare as we begin. I want to remind you that the book of Revelation is apocalyptic literature, that it's pictures and word pictures, images that are very vivid in our mind. Nowhere is that more the case than the 2 chapters we're going to be looking at today, where we have the dragon and the woman with the 12 stars. We have the beast from the sea and the beast from the land. I mean, these are some very strange images. And I think part of the reason the early Christians used apocalyptic literature is because they were being persecuted. That if the Romans came and found a copy of the book of Revelation, aha! But if they read it, it made absolutely no sense to them at all. They wouldn't understand the imagery. And so it was a perhaps a way of writing in code so that only the faithful could understand the message of the book. So that's one thing that we have going on. The practical lesson that I'd like for us to take away from today's class is that there is a spiritual war going on. We live in a physical reality. We have air to breathe, food to eat, water to drink. We have jobs to go to. We sleep at night. We have this physical world. But behind this physical world, there is also a spiritual world. And that's the thing that we have a hard time seeing. For example, we know that the Holy Spirit dwells in our heart. But how conscious are we of the presence of the Holy Spirit? Likewise, we live in a physical world, but there's a spiritual world behind it. We often don't see that. But there is a battle going on, and that's what the book of Revelation is telling us. There is a battle going on. Now, in days past, Satan was in heaven. And his job was to accuse people. And so he's always pointing the finger, if you will, about failures. And in days gone by, the saints would be accused by Satan in his presence. But there is a war going on, and as we'll see shortly, Satan and his followers have been cast out of heaven, and they are now roaming the earth. They are no longer free to accuse the saints before the throne of God, but they are here on earth doing their best to destroy our faith and separate us from God. He's got most of the world in his hands, but not the Christians, and so he focuses all of his energy on persecuting us. Let's think about some spirit beings. We've said a little bit about Satan, Santanos in Greek, Satan in Hebrew. We know about Satan, that he is a fallen angel. But what are angels? One of these days I need to have a class on the spiritual world. I think you might find that interesting. That angels, the word angels, angelos, means messengers, and they are God's spokesmen. They go and do his bidding. Not only do they bring the message, but the angels also do his bidding. They protect. For example, we have other spirit beings. Can you think of some others besides angels and demons? How about cherubim? There's the cherubim with the flaming sword at the Garden of Eden. We also have seraphim. We have all kinds of beings that are gathered there in the throne room of God, and there's a lot that we can talk about. But let's get into our text for today. The book of Revelation. Yes. Yes, I can hear it. Would you like one of the hearing devices? We've got these great hearing devices, and that'll take the microphone sound and put it like through my hearing aids, through your hearing. Okay, Orrin, if we could grab one. Okay, Orrin's going to take care of that, Don, so you be patient. But let's all together open up our Bibles to the book of Revelation, beginning in chapter 12 and verse 1. There we read, "And a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. This is a fantastic woman, glorious woman. We have the 12 stars. What do 12 represent? Well, 3 times 4. We see 12 apostles. We see the 12 patriarchs. So that is a sign. She's God's woman. And she's got the radiance of the sun, the moon under her feet. This is a grand woman, but what's going on? She was pregnant and was crying out in birth pains and the agony of giving birth. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his heads 7 diadems." Notice the word diadem. This is the English Standard Version that's translating this. Your Bible may say crowns. But you recall in an early chapter, I think the first class that we had, we talked about the difference. There are 2 kinds of crowns in the Bible. There are the Stephanos, the victor's crown, like you see in the Olympics when they wear that wreath of victory. It's an award. It's like hanging a medal. And then there's the crown that is a diadem. And again, diadem is a Greek word, and that is the crown that represents authority. It's what the queen wears. She's the ruler of the empire. Well, this beast has 7 heads, and he has 7 diadems. So he's not wearing the crown of the saints, the Stephanos that we saw in chapter 1. He's wearing the sign of authority. Now notice his tail. His tail reminds me of a puppy dog. His tail swept down 1/3 of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth. It's wagging, but it's huge. It's cast out the stars. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it. Now, this has been Satan's methodology almost from the beginning. You remember how Cain killed Abel? All right. And then we go to Moses, and how Pharaoh tried to kill Moses. And then we have Athaliah, the wicked queen who killed all of her grandchildren, save one who escaped. And of course, the paramount story is how Herod tried to kill the baby Jesus, and we see this. The dragon is waiting to devour this child, but look at, she gave birth to a male child, one who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up to God and to his throne, and the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God in which she is to be nourished for 1,260 days. That should be a very familiar number to you now. If you divide 1,260 by 30 a month, how many months do you have? 42, right? Which is 3.5 years. We see this repeated over and over again in the book of Revelation. 3.5 years. We have time, times, and half time. 3.5 years. We have 1,240 days. So this is a period. And just kind of file this in the back of your mind. This particular symbol represents the period between Christ coming, having been here, and his coming back. So this is the Christian dispensation. But let's go back and analyze this a little bit more. She gives birth to a male child who's the rule of the nations with a rod of iron. Who's that? Jesus. So who is the woman? I want you to be thinking about that as we go on a little bit farther. Who is the woman? Well, some have said it's got to be Mary. But I don't think so. I don't think so. I think that the woman represents God's people. The church is the bride of Christ. All right? And so we have God's people who do God's will and give birth to true religion. And I think that that's what's being represented here. So as we see the woman, we have the church, and we have Jesus being born. And Jesus is protected. Just as Herod was unable to kill the baby Jesus, just as to kill the baby Moses, so it is that Jesus is the one who is pictured here, that Jesus is protected. But the woman, I think that the woman is God's people, whether the Jews of the Old Testament or the Christians of the New Testament. That leads to another question. Who's the dragon? Well, again, the Bible's its own best interpreter. And we see in chapter 12, verse 9, we are told exactly who this particular dragon is. Now, if you want to waste a whole afternoon, you can read the commentators as they try to explain the dragon symbol and how dragons were on coins and images and all kinds of things. But I think it's pretty simple. We'll come to chapter 12, verse 9. Now, war arose in heaven. Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon. And the dragon and his angels fought back, but he was defeated. And there was no longer any place for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down. Now, who is the great dragon? That ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. he was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. And I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come, for the accuser of our brothers has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before our God. And they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, for they loved not their lives even unto death. How do we conquer? By boldness, by courage, by the blood of the Lamb. Therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to you, O earth and sea, for the devil has come down to you in great wrath, because he knows that his time is short. And when the dragon saw that he had been thrown down to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. But the woman was given the 2 wings of a great eagle, so that she might fly from the serpent into the wilderness, to the place where she is to be nourished, here we are, for a time and times and half time. 3.5 years. The serpent poured water like a river out of his mouth after the woman to sweep her away with a flood. But the earth came to the help of the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed the river that the dragon had poured from his mouth. And then the dragon became furious with the woman and went off to make war on the rest of her offspring, and those who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus. And he stood on the sand of the sea. Now there's some images as we go through this picture. The woman is taken to the desert. And it's interesting, if you go through the Bible and you look at desert and the symbolism that the desert plays in the whole Bible, it's a place where God meets his people. Israel was taken from the land of Egypt, and they wandered for 40 years in the wilderness, the desert. And the desert is an important place because in the desert you depend on the Lord for food, you depend on the Lord for water. A few years ago, I had an opportunity with a four-wheel, a bunch of Christians who all were Jeep enthusiasts. And there's a road across southern Arizona through a bombing range. You have to get permission, of course, to go there first. And you don't want to get too far off of the road because there's unexploded ordnance there. But there's a very famous trail called the Devil's Highway. And it was used by many of the pioneers in their covered wagons. Now, why would they choose to go through this burning desert? Far, far away from any towns or anything else? Well, the answer was to avoid the Comanches and the dangers that were to the north. And so to protect themselves, they tried to go to the south. And as you drive over this very, very rugged road, I mean, we used four-wheel drive the whole time, and it took us 2 days to cross this place. You can see evidence of the pioneers. They would leave signs alongside of the road made out of rocks, and they're still there to this day. And the stories, most of the people who tried to use the road in their covered wagon died. The reason was they didn't make it to the water hole. There is one place for water. It's called a Tanaha, and it is a place you really have to know where it is to find it, where there is a hole in the rocks where the water gathers, and it's there. Quite frankly, it's kind of nasty looking. But if you hadn't had water in weeks, it was the Garden of Eden. And I remember one of the signs, this particular wagon train, they all perished. But they left a sign alongside the trail pointing, saying the water hole is just over there. But the sign is wrong. The water hole is just over there. And you know, such tragedies along the way. But if you know where the water holes are, It's a place where God provides. Now, I was raised in Washington State, and you just step out the front door and you go, wow! Mountains, and you've got the trees, and it's green, and it's lush, and it just kind of smacks you in the face. And I didn't think I'd ever adjust. I lived in Arizona, and Jan, was raised in Arizona, and I thought, that's got to be the ugliest place on earth. It's just bare. But what I discovered is, whereas in Washington, it hits you in the face, in Arizona, the beauty is there too, but you have to get down on your hands and knees to see it. The wildflowers in the desert, for those 2 weeks that they bloom, are spectacular plants that I have seen anywhere. Save the mountain forget-me-not, which is still my favorite. But it's an incredible sight. And so the wilderness is a place where we get away from the distractions of the city. We still talk about having retreats. In fact, the ladies are having a retreat on the 9th, next weekend, next Saturday. And why do we call it a retreat? Because we get away from all of the distractions. And so the woman is taken to the desert, where the Lord protects her and provides for her. All right, I'm going to go back and make sure that we've talked about everything. To be nourished. Okay, yes. The serpent tries to kill the woman with a flash flood. Now, flash floods are dangerous in the desert. They appear there a lot. There, but the woman is saved. What protects her from the flash flood that comes from the dragon? The earth. Christians are environmentalists. Our Father created this world, spoke the world into existence. Is the world evil? No. The world reflects the Creator. And so here we protects the woman from the dangers of this particular dragon. But what about the attitude of the dragon at this point? He is really, really upset. He's furious. He's been thrown down from heaven. Is over. Some of you may remember the Second World War, and it didn't just end on June 7th after D-Day. Instead, it went all the way street by street to Berlin, and Hitler was going to destroy everything that was left. He must have known he was defeated. Like the dragon knows he's defeated, but he's going to cause as much damage as he can. And so we see him standing on the edge of the sea. All right, a couple of questions. How do angels differ from saints? We're talking about spirit beings today in spiritual warfare. How are angels different than humans? I get asked this question a lot. Well, when we go to heaven, are we going to be angels? No, that only happens in the cartoons. When Sylvester gets an anvil dropped on his head and he goes up and he's given wings and a harp. Are we going to be angels when we get to heaven? No. Angels and saints are very different. Number one, people have bodies. Angels do not have bodies. I've told you before, how do you know if someone is a human being or maybe a ghost or an angel? The answer is a ghost and an angel do not eat. And so it was that Gideon, you remember Gideon is hiding in the wine press, threshing out the wheat, and an angel appears to him. He's not sure if he's an angel. And so Gideon says, wait right here, I'm going to go make a big meal and bring it to you. And if you eat it, I know that you'll be a person. And if you don't eat it, then I know that you're who you say you are. You remember what happened? The angel says, set it here on the rock. He touches it with the staff and it's gone. And so is the angel. And that's how Gideon knows that this is truly an angel. How did the disciples know that it was Jesus and not the ghost of Jesus in the upper room? Jesus sat down and ate breakfast. He had fish and bread. And that's when they went, you really are alive. You really are resurrected. Human beings have bodies. Angels do not. Number two, angels have not been redeemed. Jesus didn't die for the angels, the seraphim, and the cherubim. Who did Jesus die for? Us. Us. We have been redeemed. And so we sing all kinds of songs about redemption and what that means, not angels. Angels are not created in the image of God. God created us in his own image. What does that mean? Does that mean that we look like God? No. What's it mean? Some have said God is the creator, and so we have this insatiable desire to create, whether it's quilting or woodworking or fixing our farms or working on our cars, that we have this insatiable desire to create. That might be. What do you think it means to be created in the image of God? We are people of worth and dignity. That's why we don't kill old people. We don't believe in euthanasia. All life has value. That's why we're opposed to abortion. All life has value. We are created in the image of God. Angels are not. And finally, angels do not have a covenant relationship with God. God has entered into a covenant with us. That's what Testament means. We have the new covenant and the old covenant. God has entered into a covenant with us, and that distinguishes us from angels. There is no covenant for angels. Let's look at another question. Notes about the devil. We've already seen that in verse 9, Satan is called the great dragon, the ancient serpent. What's that a reference to? Garden of Eden. He's called the devil and Satan and the deceiver. Satan is, number one, the slanderer. Blasphemy and slander mean the same thing. Number two, Satan is the accuser. That's his primary job. That's what his name means. It's interesting that in 1 Timothy chapter 3, that the wife of an elder and the wife of a deacon is not to be a devil, a slanderer, that they're not to gossip about people. Same thing the devil is, and he is the tempter. Let's talk about each of that. The slanderer, Satan goes around saying terrible things about people. Do you remember Job? Job was a great man of God who was extremely careful. In fact, the Lord even says, Satan, have you seen Job? And what does Satan do? Satan accuses Job. Likewise, we read about the high priest, and after the return from Babylon, the high priest's garments, they were not the greatest. It was an old suit, maybe holes in the pockets and dirty. And Satan says, how can you be the high priest? Your clothes are filthy. The Lord doesn't deny that, but the Lord says, it's his heart that I'm really interested in. Satan is the accuser. So what is Satan saying about you and I? Well, hold on to that thought, because times have changed. Let's go on and see. In Zechariah chapter 3, verses 1 through 10. In fact, let's go ahead and open our Bibles to Zechariah. First, you have to find it, right? Now, you people with electronic Bibles, Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Haggai, Zechariah. Zechariah chapter 3, verses 1 through 10. Then he showed me Joshua standing before the angel of the Lord, and Satan standing at his right side to accuse him. And the Lord said to Satan, the Lord rebuke you, Satan. The Lord who has chosen Jerusalem rebuke you. Is not this man a burning stick snatched from the fire? So, what does that mean? Well, the high priest's garments were dirty. It looked like he'd been playing in the soot. All right. But he says he's been snatched from the fire. And then he said to Joshua, see, I've taken away your sin, and I will put rich garments on you. And then I said, put a clean turban on his head. And so they put a clean turban on his head and clothed him, while the angel of the Lord stood by. The angel of the Lord gave the charge to Joshua. This is what the Lord Almighty says. If you will walk in my ways and keep my requirements, then you will govern my house and have charge of my courts, and I will give you a place among those standing here. Where's he standing? In heaven, all right? Listen, O high priest Joshua, and your associates seated before you, who are men symbolic of things to come. I'm going to bring my servant the branch. See the stone I have set in front of Joshua? There are 7 eyes on that one stone, and I will engrave an inscription on it, says the Lord Almighty, and I will remove the sin of this land in a single day. And that day each of you will invite his neighbor to sit under his vine and fig tree, declares the Lord Almighty. So again, we see Satan, and he's the accuser. But he is also, we know him mostly in the New Testament today as the tempter. Now, part of the reason for that is that Satan has been thrown out of heaven. He no longer stands before the Lord. His angels no longer stand before the Lord. They have been thrown down to earth. So Satan cannot accuse us to God anymore. And so his role today primarily is as the tempter. And it's a beautiful study to go through Matthew or Luke chapter 4 and look at the way that Satan tempted Jesus and how Jesus was able to overcome the temptations of Satan, because Jesus is giving us an example, a pattern of how to overcome Satan in this world. And that's a really important lesson, because the spiritual war that is going on is taking place here on terra firma. Satan is in a great battle and he's angry. Why is Satan so angry? Satan is a 5-time loser in the book of Revelation. We just read. First, the devil attempted to devour the male child, but God snatched him up to his throne. That's one Satan. 2, Satan fought against Michael and his angels, and he lost. By the way, can you name 2 of the archangels? We have Michael and Gabriel. Michael and Gabriel. Michael is the warrior, and Gabriel is the messenger. Gabriel is the one who announced to Zechariah the coming of John the Baptist. Gabriel is the one who announced to Mary the coming of Jesus. Gabriel is the announcer. So we had this great war there. Satan lost. That's 2 strikes, Satan. 3, the dragon pursued the woman, but God prepared a place for her in the desert. 3rd loss. 4th loss. The serpent wanted the woman to drown in a torrent, but the earth swallowed the river. 5th loss. Satan lost when he waged war against the woman's offspring, who kept on obeying God's commands and holding on to Jesus' testimony. And if I had space, I would have written, they were faithful until death. Faithful unto death. They didn't value their life more than being with God forever. So Satan is upset. He's come down and he is like a mad dog, and he's going to make as much trouble as he can. We go to chapter 13, and we're probably going to have to pick this up next week, but let's get started. And we left off as the dragon, Satan, is standing on the beach. He's on the seashore. And I saw a beast rising out of the sea with 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 diadems on its horns and blasphemous names on its head. And the beast that I saw was like a leopard, its feet like a bear's, and its mouth was like a lion's mouth. And to it the dragon gave his power and his throne and great authority. And one of its heads seems to have had a mortal wound, but its mortal wound was healed. And the whole earth marveled as they followed the beast, and they worshiped the dragon, for he had given his authority to the beast. And they worshiped the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast, and who can fight against it?" And the beast was given a mouth uttering haughty and blasphemous words. And it was allowed to exercise authority, here we are again, for 42 months. 1,240 days, times, and half time, okay, that period. So we are talking about the time before Jesus comes again. The woman is in the wilderness protected, but now Satan is on the earth, and we have this beast who comes out of the sea. It opened its mouth to utter blasphemies against God, blaspheming his name and his dwelling, that is, those who dwell in heaven. And it was allowed to make war on the saints and to conquer them. And authority was given it over every tribe and people and language and nation, and all who dwell on earth will worship it. Everyone whose name has not been written before the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who was slain. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. If anyone is to be taken captive, to captivity he goes. If anyone is to be slain with the sword he must be slain. Here is a call for the endurance and faith of the saints. Revelation 13, 1 through 10. Let's go back and talk about this beast. He comes out of the sea. What does the sea represent? It's not water. I'll just give you a hint. The sea is humanity, a sea of people. And the beast comes out of the sea. He's there in the midst of people, and he's a horrifying beast. He is like a leopard. What do you know about leopards? They are famous for stalking. Okay, they are famous for stalking. They are, in talking to hunters, African hunters, they tell me of the 7 animals, the trophy animals that they strive for, the leopard is the hardest one to get because it is so cleverly hidden and it is so incredibly fast. When it strikes, it's over before it almost begins. It goes immediately for the kill. So a leopard is a dangerous beast. What about bears? You think about the paws. Have you seen the paw of a grizzly? Where's Tom? We'll get Tom in here to talk to us about bears. He just got back from Alaska. Grizzly bear paws, have you seen those claws on a grizzly? They rip their prey apart. They rip trees apart with those paws. And so this beast is like a leopard. It's like a bear. It has a mouth like a lion. This is a terrifying beast. He's come to destroy. And he has power and a throne and great authority. Now, one of his heads, he has 7 heads. What's this number 7 represent? Complete. 10 represents, I haven't talked about this before, 10 is fullness. 10 is fullness in the book of Revelation. So he has 7 heads. He has 10 diadems. A diadem is the crown of authority. So he's got lots of power, full heads. One of the heads seems to have died, but it seemed to be a fatal wound, but it was resurrected. Now, some people have said that this represents Rome, and that the 7 heads are the 7 emperors of Rome, but there were more than 7 emperors. In fact, Suetonius wrote the lives of the 12 Caesars. So we have a problem, and so I've seen commentators try to manipulate the numbers. If we skip Julius Caesar and we say that Caligula was the first one, and we drop, they had to do all kinds of manipulations to get there. And they say that the one that looks like it was fatally wounded but came back to life, there was a myth that they talk about called the Nero Redivimus myth, which was a fable, a tale that when Nero died, he didn't really die, that instead Nero went to Parthia, and now he's coming back at the head of a Parthian army to overwhelm the Roman Empire. That didn't happen. Nero died. He committed suicide with a little help from his friends. I do not believe that these 7 heads represent the 7 emperors. I think that this beast represents worldwide authority, not just in the 1st century, but today as well. I've got news. This world is not our friend. This world is not our friend, and I don't care who you voted for in the election, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. This world is not our friend, and the politicians aren't either. How do you know when a politician's lying? His lips are moving. Yeah, we need to step above that. Yes, I'm a good citizen. Yes, I vote. But my faith is not in this world. And it has been my experience around the world, and I've traveled a great deal, that the government isn't out to protect the Christians. We need to be very, very careful. And I think that this beast from the sea represents the physical governments. We've got 2 minutes to talk about the beast from the land. We may have to come back and review this. All right. Verse 11, and I saw another beast rising out of the earth. It had 2 horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon. It exercises all of the authority of the first beast in its presence and makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast whose mortal wound was healed. It performs great signs, even making fire come down from heaven to earth in front of people. And by the signs that it is allowed to work in the presence of the beast, it deceives those who dwell on earth, telling them to make an image for the beast that was wounded by the sword and yet lived. And it was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast might even speak and might cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be slain. Also it causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, that is, the name of the beast or the number of its name. Now this calls for wisdom. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. All right, we've got the beast from the sea, the beast from the land. The beast from the sea is destructive, terrifying. The beast from the sea represents governments that are pursuing Christians. The beast from the land, what's it look like? It looks like a lamb, and it has 2 horns, and it prophesies. It deceives. It is false religion. You want to call that, whereas the beast from the sea attacks your body, the beast from the land attacks your mind. It is the false prophet. It represents philosophy and false religion. Now, the big question from the book of Revelation, the number of the beast, 666. You already have the answer. What's the number 7? Perfection. Heaven and earth together, 7. But if we take one away, we fall short. 666, imperfection, imperfection, imperfection. Well, we'll pick up and amplify this a little bit more. You want to drop me your questions. I can pick those up and we can look at it this next week. Thank you so much. This has been tough stuff to cover today, but remember, we are in a spiritual war, and our goal is to be faithful even till death. God bless everybody. Let's take a 15-minute break, and then we'll come back together for worship.